The 2019 Global Business Services Investment Conference and Awards event took place in Durban, South Africa from the 19th to the 21st of November. This conference, hosted by BPESA, the South African Department of Trade and Industry, and the KwaZulu-Natal Provincial Government, was intended to showcase South Africa's value proposition as a delivery destination for global business services. The program focused on the depth and breadth of service capability, the quality of skills of the youth, and the competitive opportunity for South Africa and continental Africa in the digitally enabled market for global services. Young people in South Africa offer a distinctive customer service experience that makes for a highly competitive and compelling proposition to end users in English-speaking markets across the world. Most of these young people are the product of impact sourcing, a practice that was first adopted in South Africa and that has evolved to become the global benchmark for socially responsible and economically sustainable sourcing. This session will explore how impact sourcing is serving to unlock the people potential of South Africa, while spotlighting the power of women in shaping the economy.
My name is Mariana Iskander. I'm the CEO of Harambee Youth Employment Accelerator. In the opening remarks, Andy described us as an ecosystem facilitator working with BPESA and the sector to really enable job growth, enable inclusive hiring, and make sure that the promise of the global business services sector can be a meaningful answer to the youth unemployment challenge in South Africa. It's my pleasure to spend roughly the next hour or so sharing with you the stories of impact sourcing from businesses that are doing it, from young people who are benefiting from it, and from analysts and experts in the sector that are going to share with us why this has become such a critical part of the value proposition for South Africa, and something that I personally believe, having observed this sector now for many years, is going to unleash and unlock growth that I think is going to make, again, a meaningful and impactful difference for our country. So we're going to kick off the session in a conversation with John. I thought that I would start, John, by asking you to tell us what intelligent sourcing is.
Okay. So firstly, thank you for having me. I'll answer any questions, but I can't answer anything about Rugby World Cup or anything like that. So, and that's in my terms and conditions, so I'm thinking, okay, fine. Intelligent Sourcing is a multimedia platform. We are based in London in the UK, although we work on a global level. And what we do is we provide information to outsourcing vendors and suppliers, but also end users, predominantly end users, in an independent format. So what we don't do is lead with any kind of vendor-led or promotional or pay-for-play content. It's all built around thought leadership, opinion piece. And, you know, we're very, very lucky to have some great editorial contributors. So we work with the outsourcing unit at the London School of Economics. We work very closely with the likes of Everest Group. I myself am the UK chapter chair for the IAOP, so we get a lot of stuff from them. And also Peter Ryan, who many of you know, is here, and you know, a number of others. So that's what we do. And we very much act as a conduit for business, really, for vendors and suppliers to reach end users.
Well, fantastic. I think that this conversation is a preview of a report that all of you will be receiving after this session that's long awaited by Intelligent Sourcing. And the topic of the report is about impact sourcing.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I thought you could give us a little bit of context about why you would write a report about impact sourcing. What is it that led you to this topic?
Okay. So we produce a number of reports, maybe say 6 a year on either different things that are topical or trend. So it may be on CX, a lot now around RPA and AI. But I had the privilege with a number of people about 18 months ago to come to Joburg on an analyst event. And a big part of that was seeing the work that Evan and Harambee do. And it's really difficult. I mean, it was life-changing. You know, I know people kind of say, oh, you know, they pull phrases out the air and they say phrases are often used too much. But, you know, genuinely we went and we saw, you know, not just the work they're doing, but the attitude of some of the youth there. And even yesterday when we went on the trip, you know, just the energy and enthusiasm. And when you put it into context, being from, you know, London and the UK and looking at, you know, the youth in the UK and what they may consider as, you know, issues or problems, which in comparison are, you know, just so trivial. And then you come here and you see the hunger, the appetite, the desire of the youth here. It's a story that needs to be told, and it needs to be told as often as possible. And as we were saying before, you know, we work in an industry that carries a lot of bad press. You know, probably within outsourcing, and the connotation of the word outsourcing is people think about, you know, data breaches, job losses, you know, businesses closing down, scandals in the paper, call centers run in poor conditions, when, you know, a story like this and about job creation and creating opportunity is really something we should all be shouting about. It's so impressive, so impressive, and that's why we did it. The other thing is that there's a lot of, from our global community, a lot of interest, certainly from buyers, about impact workers and, you know, the benefits, and they crave more information.
Well, it's interesting that you referenced buyers, because one of the things I really wanted to ask you about is that, you know, this is not an industry that does things that don't make business benefit. I mean, I think that certainly there's goodwill and good intent to do corporate social responsibility, but at the end of the day, for a globally competitive sector such as this, it really has to make business benefit. So I thought it would be useful to ask, how do you define impact sourcing? So what do you understand that to be? And what have you understood from the research that you've done and what you've included in the report to be the reasons that this makes business sense?
So my own understanding of impact sourcing and how I like to define it is creating opportunity and creating revenue streams that weren't necessarily there before, and giving people the opportunity. But I think above and beyond that, you know, obviously, primarily you're impacting, you know, the worker, the youth worker. But above and beyond that, you know, the impact is felt much further afield with, you know, family, community, you know, area that they live, the mental element of that, so the well-being of that person. And I think that is my understanding, really, when it comes to impact sourcing. So, and as the name suggests, you know, impacting, the ripple effect of that is fantastic. I think, and I asked you if I could say this before, but I think the reason why a lot of businesses now are really looking at impact sourcing, firstly, you know, I do a lot of work with the Global Impact Sourcing Coalition, who, you know, speak a lot about this. And the truth is that you get more. I mean, we're talking about, you know, what more do you get? You know, you don't get that mentality of, you know, 9 to 5 and, you know, oh, it's 3 o'clock, I finish at 5, so I'm going to start winding down and things like that. You get hunger, you get desire, you get the want to excel. You know, it was interesting yesterday at Harambee, you know, some of these youth had been there for, I think they were in the second day of their third week, and we walked in on them in a bridging session. And already, you know, they're referring to themselves or their other people in the room as colleagues, you know. So one of a young girl spoke, and then a chap next to her was like, you know, I reiterate what my colleague said, and it's that whole mindset, and, you know, it's just the hunger.
So, John, before I get to some of what's in the report, I think maybe the last topic I want to unpack with you is, as an observer of the sector and watching the trend, what is your reflection on the interest of buyers who are looking at impact sourcing? And in some sense, it's not being forced upon them, but they're the ones demanding it and asking for impact. Do you see that that's a trend that's going to continue to grow?
I think will continue to grow, but I also think that there's still a job to be done, because those that know of the concept know what an amazing concept is, but not enough people know. And it's about how, not just with Harambee and Bapeza and the DTI, but how, as a room, and everyone in this room, how we spread that message, how we talk to people about it, how we explain. Because, 2.5 years ago, if you would have said to me, what are your thoughts on impact sourcing? I would say, well, I'm not aware of the concept at all. But once you see it firsthand and get involved in it, you can't help just be captured by it. And so I believe that, everyone needs to take their responsibility in spreading that message.
Well, it's a perfect segue, because when you and I finish our conversation, we're going to bring up several businesses and young people to give us very practical examples of how impact sourcing is lived out in these businesses. I think before that, I wanted to say that you'll be getting a copy of the intelligent sourcing report. It kind of collects a variety of perspectives.
Yeah, it's probably one of the things in the 10 years of doing what I do that I'm really most proud of. And it was also really hard to do, purely because most of the contributors had maybe 500 words to put, but the amount that they wanted to say and talk about, and we had so much content, and we really had to work hard to kind of scale it down to a 32-page publication. But, it's an amazing blend of stories from vendors and stories from stakeholders, and, it's really, really worth the read.
Well, I wanted to end by reading my absolute favorite passage, so that when you get this report, I hope you'll find this, this particular thing. In a lot of the work that a lot of us do, we talk about the various stakeholders in the industry: buyers, operators, training providers, and the like. But in the article that you included here, that's a forward from Bapeza, it concludes with this paragraph. It says, "Most importantly, we would like to thank the youth of our country and our continent for their inspiration and their energy. They are defining our future, and it is looking bright." And I think that it's really important that we understand and acknowledge that young people are actually one of the most important stakeholders in the journey of impact sourcing, and that acknowledgement is there, right there at the front end of the report. So I want to thank you, John, for giving us a chance to understand what's in here. This is going to be distributed to you shortly after the session, and you'll be available and around if people have more questions and want to talk about it.
Absolutely, a pleasure, and thank you again for having me.
Such a pleasure. So what I'm going to do is invite the other participants on the stage as we say thank you to John. Perfect. Thank you so much. I'm going to play a bit of musical chairs here, invite everybody on. You can sit anywhere that you'd like. Judy. There you go. There you go. And I'm just gonna, do you mind handing this mic down so that, perfect, thank you. So I'm joined on stage by 4 organizations, and more importantly, 2 very special young people, to start to talk about what impact sourcing actually looks like. How is this operationalized in businesses? What do we see as the actual benefits, not just for the talent that we're trying to bring in, but for the lives that are getting changed and the communities that are getting impacted? So what I'm going to do is give each organization an opportunity to talk briefly about who they are and what they do. And then we're going to just try to focus on a different aspect of impact sourcing. And then we're going to close with the most important voices of all, with Pearl and Tembankosi, to share with us their experiences and their journeys. I thought I would start with the birthday boy. Happy birthday again, Brendan.
Thank you.
So Brendan, what I thought I would ask you to reflect on is the journey that WebHelp has had from the buyer perspective. and what you've observed and experienced in terms of buyers' responses to impact sourcing, what's worked, what hasn't worked. I think we all understand that when it's something buyers want, everything's a lot easier. But I mean, I think as John said, there's still a job to be done. So I thought if you could share that reflection with us.
Yeah, so we've definitely seen a shift in the focus of the intention from a buyer perspective. You know, previously you'd always see wage arbitrage and the, you know, the economy, the economics of outsourcing and contact centers play a big role. And then over time we saw a greater focus on emotional intelligence, the ability of young people to make judgments on behalf of people to resolve complex issues. And through those buying cycles, there was always a passing resemblance to social responsibility and a passing resemblance to things that, you know, that really matter for the youth of South Africa. I think particularly over the last 18 months or so, we've seen a much bigger focus on how do we introduce, or how do we make business more human and bring the human elements into what is being represented from an offshore perspective. And so that's helped us to build the story and the value proposition around impact sourcing. So we've been on the journey for a number of years, and I met you back in Cape Town, I think 2012-13, when we first started speaking, and that was a kind of a foreign concept to many people. And we've continued to build incrementally our knowledge of what it means, and it's now become a fundamental part of our value proposition. And from a buyer perspective, you know, they are pushing us now, and particularly from the UK and US clients who come to us, they almost want to hear that first. They almost want to hear about who are going to be the people representing my brand, and what are their capabilities, and also what are their stories. And we're going to hear some great stories today. And that value proposition has been proven fundamentally. Those of you, I believe some of you saw it last night, around the case study from a shop direct perspective. So that's been our longest standing consumer, if you will, of impact sourcing, and really found it interesting. And we've shown that through the investment in impact sourcing and the trust that we've built in the process, we've seen significant benefit from a customer experience point of view. In measured terms of things like NPS, we see a step change and a big difference in performance on customer outcomes. And then on the people side, we've seen a significant step change in behavior and attitudes. And John spoke just now about attitudes. And that's fundamental. We've seen retention rates of over 90% after 12 months of a particular cohort. We've seen a 76% lower propensity in industrial relations or people relations issues. And that makes the return on investment significantly cheaper, if you will, because you spoke about earlier around buyers do look at the economics of outsourcing, and that's why this is a big part of our value proposition, because we've proven that taking people through an intelligent bridging process that is mapped to your customer journey allows them to come into the world of work equipped, and then with that attitude and that hunger, they immediately give great experience to customers, and that's what buyers want. So we found some really good stories and powerful stories to tell, underpinned by facts, underpinned by a value equation, a return on investment, because it's not cheaper than traditional channels, impact sourcing, and nor should it be because of the upfront investment. But the return that you get, customers are hearing about it, clients, buyers are hearing about it as we spread the story, and now they almost come to us and speak about it first. And I guess just one anecdote I'll leave with as well is John spoke about 2 years ago, he wouldn't really have known or been able to articulate impact sourcing. I think a similar question from a buyer just over a year ago, when, as you graciously do many times, help share the impact sourcing story, halfway through the story, before they'd had the opportunity to speak, to hear some of the human stories, is, I don't want that. These people have no experience, they have no life experiences, and they lack the temperament to deal with some of the really trying questions that come from international customers. And then after they heard some of the stories and were able to interact, they came back and said, I was so wrong. These guys have got bags of intelligence, for one, great attitude and life experiences that you can't teach. And now that made the difference. So from a buyer perspective, there was a 180-degree turnaround that says, I want that. That leads the conversation with that client whereas other clients have never really followed through on their CSR promise. That particular client now is they leading the entry into the country with how do I make a difference to the community. So it's been a catalyst for fundamentally changing how we go to market and how we speak about human experiences from an outsourcing perspective.
Thanks for that. It's actually a perfect segue because once you get the buyers on board, as we all know, then they come with a long list of criteria about what they expect and what they need. And one of the journeys that I think we certainly as an organization with many people in the room have walked is many requirements for prior work experience, many requirements for certain qualifications. So, Lynette, I wanted to ask you to reflect on the journey that Merchants has walked in thinking very differently about all of these preset requirements. What have you seen is actually needed? What has been difficult about changing hiring requirements? And what are your reflections if you wanted to give advice to others in the room from the lessons that you've learned?
Thank you, Mariana. So from a merchant's perspective, the journey, what has been identified is that obviously hiring for the right attitude and making sure that we match the right person to our clients' requirements so they become proper brand ambassadors is a key part of the journey. So what we've identified is with impact sourcing, we've got people with great attitude, willingness to help, great empathy. So how do you find those people? So within the merchant's journey, what has happened is there's been the development of the My Calling, which is a digital platform. It's a free data platform, which is able for anybody to access, put on their details, and the information stays there. But if an impact source or impact worker has not had previous work experience or had an educational background, when some of those key questions are asked on other talent, historical talent acquisition programs, it becomes very hard for them and they give up. So on the My Calling, it actually has a slightly different approach. It looks at 13 behavioral aspects or attributes of the individual that we've identified really suits generically the environment that we're working within, especially being on the customer management side. On top of that, a cognitive approach. So less so about the experience, less so about the educational, and more so about what makes you good at who you are. What are those things that you can bring that can make a difference? So already there's been over 16,000 applications on the My Calling app, plus we've already placed 6,000. And what we've seen is because we do a baseline, an optimum baseline for the clients as well, we get a better match, which has also then had even a higher impact on attrition, so that we're actually reducing it. So it's really about matching the right person to the right job, not so much on what they've done historically, but more about who they are and what they can contribute to the workplace. So that has really shown great results, and the journey is continuing. So one of the things that we know with even in that process, it's one thing to apply and get over that hurdle. The application is being further supported by providing an LMS system so that people can continue to learn. They've got access to learning materials and information that can also improve the ability to contribute. And even within that, there's even a transportation service that's being supported within that app. So it's one thing applying, putting on your details. The app will help how to set about supporting you on your first interview, plus at the same time, as a start-off process, how to get to the job, and then from there onwards, how to further develop. But I think what's key is that often people give up because they feel they keep applying, it costs money, whereas in this particular process, we've realized you're not always the right person for that particular environment, but you may be for the next. But if you've given up, we wouldn't know. So at least here we keep you as a candidate on the database.
Well, that really resonates, I think, probably with a lot of us in the room, that if we don't break these barriers and give young people an opportunity to show what they can do, they continue to be excluded from opportunities and jobs that we know they can actually perform in. So I think if we've gotten the buyers on board, we've figured out the right ways to hire them and get them in, now they actually have to perform and they have to be able to sort of demonstrate the benefits of using this alternate talent pool in this new way of sourcing. So I thought, Lizelle, you could reflect with us a little bit about what CareerBox's journey has been in the kind of work preparation, and then what have you seen to be the actual benefits to the business of impact sourcing?
Thank you. I think the first thing is impact sourcing is a no-brainer. So if you're not doing it or don't know about it, please talk to me. People generally associate impact sourcing with disadvantaged or oh shame, I have to sacrifice on my performance, I have to sacrifice on my stats, retention rate, and etc. The reality is that's absolutely not true. We've seen over the years that specifically in the contact center industry, the contact center industry can easily absorb these individuals, create sustainable jobs, and more importantly, successful careers without having to sacrifice on performance, on retention. If anything, the expectation when they get into that environment exceeds what their current stats look like. And we've seen tremendous results in the contact center industry in terms of performance and retention. And CareerBox's role in the beginning is that opportunity and that investment of developing individuals, focusing on what is the skills gap, addressing the challenges these individuals have, but also using it to benefit the organizations. So there's no sacrifice that needs to be made. If anything, because of their challenges, they built for resilience and deserve an opportunity and exceed the expectations once given that opportunity.
It all sounds too good to be true, and the good news is I think we have all lived what you're talking about and seen that it is possible firsthand. So once we've gotten the young people in the environment and once they're performing, I think one of the things that we could probably all agree is that this isn't an autopilot exercise. It requires ongoing investment, it requires lots of learning, it requires continued innovation and tweaking. And so I thought it would be useful, Judy, to end with you in the Journey of You Academy of trying to really think about what a holistic approach looks like so that the benefits of now this journey of getting a young person and getting them to actually perform in the job is sustained. And what have been some of the experiences that you've had?
Thank you. The Academy has been set up as an accredited entity for development of our people and beyond at WNS, and the focus has always been on development for and beyond our own. The critical thing there is that it needs to be something beyond sourcing. It's almost like impact supporting. It takes a huge amount of time, resilience, effort and investment to onboard young people, and so many of us then only to lose them a few weeks or months later because of the experience that they've had. So we've created a very specific focus on supporting them and setting them up for success with a view that it's as important as where they come from as to how they land. And they're landing in our environments, and these are tough environments, and they're fast-paced and they're highly pressurized. And we are fully aware that many of our candidates or our young talent coming in have a gap and are not going to just hit the ground running. So I always think about a challenge as an opportunity. So our view is that this is an ancillary benefit because it speaks to the fact that your organization needs to streamline and improve and level up its leadership. So the environments that these young people are landing in, have we thought through all of the ecosystem supports necessary for them to succeed? Has our pre-intake job readiness been great? Has our onboarding and technical training been good? Have they been provided with a team leader who's been coached and managed and developed to support impact source candidates? Is there we call our strapline is destined for diversity. Is there a culture that's valuing diversity and inclusion throughout the organization? Is every level of leadership in that organization, including self-leadership, geared to creating an environment of learning that supports the success once they land? So it's equally, if not more challenging, to ensure and take responsibility for that first job experience than it is to actually gain entry into that job experience. These young people are connected, they're brand ambassadors for our profession, for our businesses, and if they are not having a significant, supportive, or meaningful and purposeful experience when they land, it nullifies all the effort up front. So impact sourcing is around creating meaningful, purposeful, sustainable careers, giving our young people a visible path. We always say to them, it's not, your entry isn't your destination. And sometimes your entry into this role doesn't necessarily mean this is where you will always be. But if you're in an environment that supports you and your personal growth to add the value that you can, then this is the first step to anywhere. And if we can keep them engaged for those first 12 months, we have them. If we disengage them in those first 12 months, we lose them, and their willingness or all of that aspiration that you saw earlier just gets successively less and less. And we want to be providing hope and opportunities for aspirational delivery and not the opposite. So I think it's an important lesson for us to take very seriously our responsibility. The learning happens on the job, guys. That's where the rubber hits the road, and how they are supported through that process in their first 6 to 12 months is critical for impact sourcing, or as I say, impact supporting to make a difference.
Well, I think one of the themes that started with John is, I mean, it's very rare to find good news stories where vicious cycles can become virtuous cycles. And the idea of giving young people an opportunity to contribute to businesses, they then outperform others, they stay, they get promoted, they grow those businesses, they contribute to their families, they contribute to their communities, and I think that a lot of the energy that so many of us have about this sector is that that is such a powerful and positive story, not just for South Africa, but I think globally and certainly for the African continent. So I wanted to try to put some human faces to, I think, what that journey is, and to invite first Pearl into the conversation. So the thing that I learned from our chat earlier is you are a manager. You manage a team of 160 people. And I thought you could reflect on what the journey has been for you, and what has it been like to have come into the sector and now to grow into the position that you have now.
If someone told me 6 years ago I'd be sitting in a room telling the story, I would not believe that. I come from a community where this is impossible. My mother was a street vendor, and nobody has ever gone to tertiary. So what transpired was, I knew coming of just finishing matric, that was it. There was no other option in terms of university. It's not even a discussion that you have because the finances are just not there. So when I got introduced to a program called Career Box, I then took the last bit of money that we had. I remember it was a loaf of bread and milk, which would be like 22 Rand at the time, and traveled all the way to go into one of the centers in order to just try and find a job, because someone said they're not looking for experience, which in every single paper they said experience. They said you need to have a tertiary education, and literally I didn't have that. I just matriculated, and I then went into a career box with absolutely nothing, and there was somebody telling me that I could achieve the impossible. And I was like, are you serious? And they were like, yes, you can achieve the impossible. And through training and development within Career Box, I had successful placements within a contact center, which is the contact center that I work for now, which is CCI. And from there on, I went from being an agent, I went into a role of being a team manager, and within 2 years of being a team manager, I became an operations manager, where I'm now leading 160 individuals. That's close to 12 managers and agents. The difference that it's done to my family is when the toughest conversation was with my mom is she couldn't send me to school. My younger sister, who comes after me, I've been able to send her to school. She's getting a tertiary education. And moving on, it's my cousins who are able to now come in and work in the same contact center that I'm working in, where their parents are not able to also afford the education as well, the education piece as well.
So maybe just another question for you, because there are so many young people who I think have a similar experience. I mean, and you reflected on it. It's like you apply, you apply, you apply. Nobody ever gets back to you. You're not sure why you're not getting the job. You're spending money you don't have to be able to do that. And then when there's an opportunity where somebody says you don't need experience, and it's not a scam, which is rare, because I think, as you know, lots of young people are getting invited to things where there are no jobs at the end. Mm-hmm. What is it that you think that young people really need to do to grab these opportunities? If you think about what your own journey is and you think about giving advice to other young people, what would it be?
My advice is, or would be, is, I mean, it's very strange, as you say, when somebody says, here, I'm going to afford you an opportunity to be greater than what your expectation is. And I look at it in terms of, we come from a background where if someone says, I'm going to give you something, because you know you don't have anything else. Like, there was nothing else if I didn't take this opportunity. I would probably be also assisting either as a cleaner, because that was where my mom was looking for a job in a hotel, in terms to be a cleaner. And if somebody comes and says, here's an opportunity, because you know there is no fallback, I think what tends to happen is it spirits you towards going to excel. And all you want to do is produce, and whatever targets you are given, whatever drive that you are given in terms of performance, and you've got support and mentorship throughout the journey, you want to excel to show the people that have given you this opportunity that, hey, wait a minute, this is just not my story, but the thousands of others, because the 160 people that I'm in charge of, everybody has the same story. Everybody comes from the same background. We all share the same tale. So we want to succeed, all 160 of us in that area, simply because we know there is no fallback.
Well, I think that you should be the spokesperson for South Africa and for this industry, because that's exactly the story. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. Thembakosi, let's talk about your story. So I thought maybe you could just start by telling us a little bit about what the journey has been for you to get the job that you have now and where you're working.
Okay, thank you very much. I was born and raised in a very poor background at home, so my father didn't care if you go to school or not, so I managed to go to school at the age of 7. I started school in grade R, so I was very old in my class. So I managed to go to school, and I worked hard. I did matriculated. Then it was not easy for me because my father was not going to support me financially to go to school. So it wasn't easy for me to see my friends going to universities, getting letters accepted, so something like that. It was difficult to me. So I did manage to go to the college. Then I did because I wanted to be an electrician. I grew up wanted to be an electrician, so I did electricity. I did the ends in the college, so I was given a chance to go to the varsity. So in the varsity I did my S1, so my brother supported me. So in 2016, my brother fell sick, so he couldn't support me anymore. So I had to drop out at varsity, in varsity, then take care of him. So he was very sick in such a way that in 2017, before I got the job, he passed away. So it wasn't easy for me because I had to support the family because he was the only person who was looking after the family. So I went on Facebook, then I saw the job readiness program on Facebook. So I said to myself, no, let me take a chance here because I know it's not electricity, what I wanted to be, but now it's the call center. So I said, no, let me take this opportunity then. Then I was called for 2 interviews. Luckily enough for me, I managed to get the job. So I worked hard because we were around, I think we were 18 in the beginning of the learnership. We ended up, 2 of us were left there in the company, the WNS. So yeah, for now I'm working at WNS. I'm managing stock with telecom clients. So yeah, I'm happy. Now I'm able to support family, and I'm making sure that my siblings, the siblings that are younger than me, I'm helping them because two of them now, I gave them money to go to school. They're at school now, they are in college, I'm supporting them, so I'm trying.
Fantastic. I mean, I think that your story of overcoming so many challenges to be able to succeed in your job, and you know, when buyers and investors come and they say, you know, we really want resilience, we're like, I think we can deliver resilience. I wanted to ask you one last question, because in the room we have people from government, we have people who make decisions in companies, and if you had an opportunity to give them advice about what they need to think about for young people like you to be able to find jobs, what would be the advice that you would want to give to government officials, or that you would want to give to business leaders about what they need to do or what they need to do differently so that young people like you and like Pearl can have more opportunities?
Thank you. I think government is more focused on creating job opportunities, of which I think that's the biggest problem. That's the reason why the unemployment rate is like increasing. Because it's not that we need jobs, we don't need jobs, but we need to be upskilled. We need to develop skills, because now if I can be like, get the job, but most of the companies now want skills before you get the job. So if you have the skill, then it's up to you. You can even create your own job, then employ people. So I think government needs to focus to supporting those small businesses, then support programs that upskills the youth. Yes.
Well, I think what's amazing about both of your stories, and certainly something that we've seen in our work with hundreds of thousands of young people, is that this is a sector anybody can find their way into, even if they started studying technical fields or if they started studying hospitality, and that this is a sector that makes you part of the global economy and gives you a chance to think differently about the work that you're doing, not just in South Africa, but actually across the world. So even though we've only had an opportunity to hear two stories on stage, I want to remind you that we have young people that are here at the conference. They're available for mock interviews, which is an opportunity for you to engage with them as they prepare themselves for a first job, give them an opportunity to get feedback, also I think learn a little bit about them. So if you haven't done that already, there's a sign up outside that will give you an opportunity, not just, and I hope you do, find our young people here and ask them more questions and learn more about their stories, but that you engage with the many, many other young people that are here at the conference and that are, I think, part of making the story of impact sourcing have a real and human face. So I just want to thank all of you for coming and sharing your practical experiences, for sharing your stories, I think for giving us an opportunity to understand what impact sourcing can actually look like in the businesses, in the operators, with buyers. So if you'll join me, we'll give this panel a big thank you.
You okay?
Yeah, go ahead. Thank you guys so much. We're going to shift gears a little bit and emphasize two, I think, last aspects of the sector that I think are worth pausing and reflecting on. The first is that this is actually a sector in the South African context that's majority female. And so a lot of the success and the performance and the results that we're talking about are actually powered by women in terms of the percentage of women that are in the sector. And the second is, which is a theme that I think has come through in the conversations here, is the idea of empowerment and the idea of giving a young person an opportunity to really empower themselves to grow and empower themselves to change their own lives and that of their families and their communities. So what I'm going to do next is invite the CEO of CCI, Mark Chana. He's going to be joined by Zondwa Mandela of the Legacy Foundation. They're going to come up on stage, and I'm going to give them an opportunity to have a bit of a conversation with us about those two topics.
Thank you, Mariana. Good afternoon, everyone. What are you sitting?
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, I've got the honor this afternoon of welcoming Zondwa to our sunny, or normally sunny city, Durban. So welcome.
I can have this. Yeah, thank you.
In most cases, I think the dreaded slot that everyone doesn't want is the one after lunch. Yeah, and the reality now we've found out is the slot you don't want is the one after the kids from Career Box and Arambe. So genuinely, well done. Good luck, Zondwa. Is all I can say.
I think you guys deserve a round of applause. I was actually quite touched and moved by that. Yeah, really, really proud.
So we met quite a few years ago, and I think
Correct.
the thing that brought us together, Zondwa, was we had very similar views in terms of what we thought we needed to do to kind of help South Africa and really work towards that. And I think maybe the best place to start is, why don't we give everyone an idea of Mandela Legacy that you founded, why you founded it, and what kind of work you're looking after.
Okay. Look, I think first and foremost, I'm very proud, I guess, to be a part of this segment that you referred to. It really, my background is in business, and I think at the heart of business, there must be a realistic human touch, a human touch that is far more sustainable than the concept of profitability. I come from a family that sacrificed a lot of their time for, human rights, together with the collective of many other South Africans. And it's really been a case of how do we continue the legacy that my grandparents, continue to set out. How do we take, this fight of, human rights, addressing, a lot of social issues and ensuring that we can fight for equality? How do we take that and ensure that it is a much more sustainable initiative? Because I think legacy is very critical, but I think legacy also has to exist within the current trend. And, so we as an organization, we focus on job creation, training and education, women in leadership, and financial literacy. And literally, it was just a case of, trying to say that, we completely appreciate, this legacy that our grandparents created, but what can we do to ensure that this very legacy that we're a part of actually exists when my children are ready to take it over? Because all I am, I believe, is that I'm a caretaker who has the responsibility of having been given the opportunity, having gone to school, educated, and also had the opportunity to actually explore various opportunities. What could I do in order just to kind of take my responsibility and apply it accordingly? And I really liked what Pearl touched on, is that what leads us to that particular place is diversified. It may be a result of an unfortunate circumstance. It may be the result of actually great opportunity. But the point is, at the end of the day, we're all equally trying to address a very common and serious issue of job creation, but ensuring that it touches those that need it most.
Okay. Really noble in terms of what you're doing and what you're trying to change. But I think the thing that surprised me is you wouldn't normally associate a Mandela name with the BPO industry.
Sure.
Yeah? So maybe give us a bit of background in terms of why you're really interested in this sector and what it can do and some of the work that you're already doing within it.
Yeah. So, my, and guys, forgive me, I need to continuously transverse to the past in order to actually express the future, because it's very important to reflect where we come from. The icons whom I refer to as my grandparents believe very strongly in issues around youth. My grandfather was a great advocate for education, and they were both equally invested around youth issues. But my grandmother would always say that, what is the point of things like education if you're not going to create opportunity for people? So jobs are very critical to that debate. But even for someone like her, things around diversity and inclusion were also very critical. So, we were then able to then say, really an extension of that is really the very practical things that we're speaking about. South Africa currently faces one of the largest unemployment rates. I know everyone has heard these figures, but you're talking about a 27% unemployment rate, over 50% unemployment rate within the sector of youth. And a large, demographic of that 50% is actually 65% women, right? So at the end of the day, it's really been, for us, we realize that unemployment is a major issue. We believe that the Mandela brand has an ability to be a strong advocate for an industry. And it's really, about us being a part of this coalition of the willing and utilizing and leveraging our strengths with what we know, collaborating with the right individuals so that we can collectively address an issue which, if nothing is done about it, is actually just, will continue to become a global, narrative across across many communities, and that's what we really want to avoid.
Okay, and I think one of the key points you talked about then was collaboration and an enabler. So it's partnerships with businesses like Harambee and CareerBox, I suppose, that help you enable the job creation into the industry that then kind of goes and attacks one of your pillars of what you're working on.
Correct. Look, I mean, it's, Mark, it's like, it's, at the end of the day, it's really about our ability to do what I think we can all agree is a serious thing. We've all identified with the fact that unemployment is an issue. I've identified with that reality. But the point is, my ability to actually address it is probably, let's say, lack of a better word, easier if I've got a lot of minds in the room to actually assist us in actually achieving that. So I think from a collaborative point of view, we understand what our role is, and we strongly leverage on the abilities of organizations such as CareerBox, Harambee, to actually train and upskill these individuals, because that's what's critical. But then I think it helps us to actually have a very uniformed message, because when we then, as an organization, go to other parts of the world, because in a free market economy, we're then saying that outsourcing has the potential to actually employ a lot of people in South Africa. Outsourcing is generally a big business. Markets such as India and the Philippines are, light years ahead of South Africa in terms of how many people they actually, or rather the market share. And we are basically saying to many foreign businesses, organizations in the US, UK, Australia, predominantly English-speaking destinations, that, guys, South Africa actually could fulfill your requirements, not only from a basis of, or like for like commercially, but the point is there could be a lot more benefit, because I strongly believe in the human resource here, and I think that human resource has the potential just to lend itself positively to profit margins for various organizations. And, for as long as our message is that we really need that implementation to be carried out by other organizations that are actually able to extend that message.
Okay, fantastic. And I think picking up from one of the points that Marianne brought is, you're talking about unemployment, 29.1%. In the youth, it's about 45%. But the actual number that is the most scary is young black female at 65, 66%. Yeah. I know job creation is really important to you, but I know making sure from a gender equality perspective, it's equally important because of a lot of your background and bringing up. Do you want to kind of touch on some of that part of it and your mission?
I mean, look, it's it's public knowledge that my family is the byproduct of a woman's ability to overcome the unthinkable, and that has always been something that just resonates, and it's just really reflective, I think, in a lot of the work that we do. And it's quite unfortunate that it's just me sitting here, but quite an integral part of our organization is actually my wife, who runs the organization, and in fact, the founders, who are my mother and a late grandmother. They had a very strong vision, which I think I never really needed convincing in order to actually support that particular vision, in terms of how critical it is for us to actually address these issues that, in most cases, by virtue of the demographic, in many cases, a lot of these social ills, in fact, have a greater impact on women, and so I think it's really not about trying to latch on to this, narrative of equality, but I mean, it's as real and as practical as you're describing it. What we're able to do in terms of creating awareness and what we're able to do in terms of creating these opportunities and jobs has a direct impact on women in general. And, when you're able to empower women, I think you're able to build stronger communities simply because of the care and responsibility that women play within our communities, in fact, in every community.
No, fantastic. And I often say that running a good business and a profitable one are not mutually exclusive, and loads of people have heard me say that. But the reality is, and the irony is, unemployment in that sector is almost criminal, but the flip side of that is, the best agents in my business are all the women.
Yeah.
And so it should be something that together we can easily overcome. I think in closing, I'm going to ask you, and I'm going to steal one of Marianne's questions, and I'm going to ask you the same question, is you've got a room full of stakeholders here.
Yeah.
Some governments, some investors. What would be your ask to them?
Look, and I've had to learn to actually say this quite bluntly. The objective here is really to create jobs. I believe with the many people that actually sit in this room, there's an ability to do so. Like I've said, we are lobbying and convincing many large corporations actually consider South Africa as an outsourcing destination. I think collectively we've all identified that there is a very real human requirement here. But at the end of the day, that particular requirement has the possibility to actually result in actually positive outcomes for an organization, because you're not only investing in the great infrastructure here, you're investing in a country that has some of the best human resource. And look, South Africa is just literally a complement of what the rest of Africa has to offer. So, support us in this particular vision. And, further to that, I also would like to, make a call that, when we also speak about this issue of unemployment and we speak about this 50% of, unemployed people, we must also realize that in saying so, you're then indirectly implying that there are another 50% that are employed or have some sort of, opportunity. So, as I assume we're all leaders and founders here, but we all represent just but a minute element of that support structure. In organizations, you find the leaders are at the top, and a lot of pressure and social will sits there. And as you drop within an organization, as the numbers increase, I think the social drive or the moral requirement slowly filters down. And our responsibility is just to maybe ensure that in each and every organizational structure, we spread the message where it matters most. Ensure that besides ourselves, we're able to carry this message of support to one another with the employment base, and just ensuring that we're empowering, like Tim Nkosi said, we're empowering those that need it most and those that actually have the ability to assist us in touching as many people as possible.
Fantastic. And I think in closing, I think both of us want to thank everyone in this room, because if we're honest, without you, without your investment, without your jobs, it'll make our lives much harder and we can't go and make the impact that we want to. But obviously, Zondra, thank you for joining us in Durban. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thank you. Absolutely perfect. Thank you again to both of you. We're gonna have our send off to lunch with a message of inspiration. So I wanted to invite Farah Fortune to come up on stage. She's the founder and director of African Star Communication. She's gonna leave us with a few closing words about some of the topics of empowerment and women that we've had in the session. Okay.
Good afternoon, should I say. Thank you very much for having me here today. I will give you a little bit of a background of who I am and where I'm from and why you're sitting here listening to me. But before I do that, because I know everyone's had tea and everyone's tired and you're hungry and you really don't want to listen right now, you're thinking about the lunch you're having, so indulge me, please. If you have a pen, take the pen. If your hands are clean, take your finger like this, and then put it in your mouth like this. turn to the person next to you. Don't take it out because I need to speak. Turn to the person next to you. And what are you doing? You're smiling. That is from an actual, I didn't just make that up, I promise. It's an actual body study. And when you're feeling a little bit down and not having the best day in the world, just do that. If nothing else, you'll feel like an idiot and laugh at yourself. So my name is Farah Fortune. I'm the director and owner of African Staff Communications. I started my business approximately 12 years ago. I started my business as a necessity entrepreneur. I was making approximately 12,000 Rand a month. I had a 3-year-old daughter. I had to pay for a car, rent, nursery school fees, and everything else. And I really wasn't left with much at the end of the month. And I love luxury shoes, and I was like, this is not going to work. So I decided, okay, I need to do something about this. And I registered my company, and I walked into my office at work on the 20th of June, 2008. I'll never forget. And I logged onto my Gmail address, and I remember my CC for my company coming through, and I literally packed up my bags and I handed in my resignation, because in my delusional head, an entrepreneur was going to make money. Yeah, that didn't happen. So I packed up, I handed in my resignation letter, and I was like, okay, I can do this. I can do this. Because I was billing for my company almost 2 million Rand a month, and I was getting paid 12,000 Rand a month. Something didn't make sense to me. And I packed up, I started my own business, and then in the first 3 weeks, I actually got my first contract with Manchester United for the Vodacom Challenge. So I did a little charity day for them, and I made 10,000 Rand. And for the next 6 months, I made no other money. And I was like, is this gonna work? And I got kicked out of my house with a 3-year-old. We lived in my car for a little bit, and eventually I got back on my feet. And while I was going for interviews in my previous job, I realized something. I realized that public relations in South Africa is a very male-dominated industry, and all the big companies are owned by men, but they're all run by women. And I was like, that didn't make sense. And unfortunately, almost 12 years later, not much has changed. So I thought, I need to make that change. I need to make the difference for women in South Africa. And I decided that I was only going to hire women. And I have done that for 12 years. Only one of my staff members in the last 12 years has actually been qualified in PR. Everyone else came to me unqualified, and I made a pledge to them that I'll make sure that when you walk out of this office, you go to something better. I always said to them, you cannot stay here. You will not retire from African Star. You need to do better than this once I train you. And that's exactly what they've done. My very first staff member is now working at the Bank of England in London. She's one of their events managers and does some PR for them as well. And she came to me as a PA. I realized that women empowerment in South Africa is something that is so spoken of and so invested in, but it never reaches where it's supposed to be. So I decided I'm going to do something about it, and I have actively done that in the last few years, getting involved in women empowerment programs that allow women to express who they are through the talents that they have that is never really looked at when they sit in an interview. Because think of it, ladies, when you go to an interview, especially when there's a male interviewer, what do they ask you? Especially if you don't have kids. Do you plan on having children? Right? Now, as men, raise your hands, how many of you have been asked that in an interview? Exactly. So this is my point, and this is one of the reasons I've only ever hired women. I wanted to be in a position where I made a difference, where if your child was sick, you could bring them into the office. You're having a bad day, work from home. Don't feel like you need to wear makeup to impress anyone. Don't feel like you need to do your hair today, because we all have those bad days. So I've provided an office and a space in order to make sure that women are comfortable. I also come from a very strict Muslim background. I know it doesn't look it, right? And I grew up in a family that specifically expected me to grow up, finish high school, and get married. That wasn't gonna happen. And I fought with my family over that, and it was hard. Even though now they support me in what I do, and my mother's first question when I started this business is, are you gonna be able to support yourself? And I think after 12 years, and I'm now paying her bills, I think she's quite happy that I'm supporting myself. So it made a big difference to me, and I realized that I couldn't only make a difference within women empowerment in my company. I realized I needed to do work outside of that. Because of the work that I've done, I work with Google in a program called Woman Will. I'm the chapter lead for Johannesburg. So I go into rural areas and I teach young girls, especially young girls who think they don't have a future. I teach them how to use technology to start businesses. The ladies that you see on the side of the road selling trinkets, corn, those kind of things, I go in and teach them how to make that a sustainable business so they can change from being a necessity entrepreneur to an opportunity entrepreneur. To make sure that they're not standing there because they have to, but because this is what's going to buy them a house, buy them a car, put their kids through school. It's not just to make sure that they eat tonight. So I do programs like that. I also I'm involved in the Sherry Blair Foundation in the UK. I mentor girls from around the world. And I was very, very, very blessed. I don't even know how, but I received an award from the UN in March for the work that I do. And for a colored girl from South Africa, you need to understand when you're growing up in the hood, you don't expect things like that to happen. So yes, girl. So there are many opportunities for us as women in this country. What we need to understand is stop competing with men. We're better than that. Not because they're useless. They have their thing. Please, I don't hate men, please, not at all. Okay? But I really do believe that the opportunities that are there and the opportunities that I have gotten, there were very few women who opened those doors for me previously. I have to attribute that to a lot of men in my life who actually opened the doors for me to have a better career. And what we need to realize as women, that closing the door behind us is not going to work for our next generation. We need to hold the door open and realize it's not a competition. It's about making sure that our daughters have a better life, that our sons know how to act, that we can go jogging in the streets and not be scared. It's all about making sure that as people and as women, we get along with each other to a point where we're going to empower each other, not just through what we do and holding open doors, but just being kind, being nice, understanding what we need as people. Investing in South Africa, especially in black women, is what we need right now, because I feel like I said before, we have all this money being invested. None of it seems to be reaching the right people. So for all the investors here today, I urge you, invest in us. We have so much more potential than you realize. But please, make sure that the money you're investing is going to help us. Thank you.